get in. Okay. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. 285 games in a regular season with the playoffs. 3 games left. I'm joined alongside RC Fisher, the owner and founder of FF Metrics, and the host of the Bet the Close podcast, Chris Bolello. We're going to break down all the championship game weekends, talk about betting trends, props, and everything we like. So the first one on the slate, the Commanders are going into Philadelphia to take on the Eagles. This is a divisional matchup in the conference championship game. The last time that happened was when San Francisco played the Rams, I believe 3 or 4 years ago. Eagles are favored by 6 points. The over-under is 47.5. RC, where are you leaning on this game?
I bet Washington at -4.5. When the odds kind of first came out, they were fluctuating 4.5, 5.5. I took the points with Washington. Then when it got to 6, I took some more of the points with Washington. And I'm not pounding my fist on the desk for Washington in this game. Not this radical Commanders lover. My early instinct, and I bet it early, is I think Jalen Hurts is hurt worse than they're letting on. I know he practiced in full today, and he may be fine, and I get burned potentially on this, although I still like the points. But a lot of it had to do with, I think Jalen Hurts is going to be limited, kind of in the way like Jordan Love had that groin injury, and then he was practicing in full, and he's like, I'm fine, everything's fine. And then it wasn't fine in the games. I think I'm wondering and thinking and hedging that might be Jalen Hurts' story, and that gives the window for Washington to go get this win if all of a sudden Hurts, even if they just don't do him on tush pushes because they're worried about his knee. That caught up to them in the Rams game. That almost cost them the Rams game because they tried to go for it in a regular alignment with Saquon, and Saquon got stuffed because everybody knew they were going to Saquon. You can't stop the tush push. So if you take that away, that's a huge factor to take away in that game. So that's why I'm with Washington. Not radically so, but.
Chris, home favorites in the playoffs when it's a divisional game, they're 20 out of 20 and 15, 57%. When the line is 6 or more points, that jumps up to 12 and 4, 75%. Where are you leaning here?
My heart would be with RC and the Commanders, but my head immediately was so disappointed that this was the NFC Championship game, because I think it was the only matchup that I would be disappointed with. Eagles-Lions, I would have loved. Lions, Rams,
anybody.
Rams, anybody. I would have been excited about. Eagles Lions, I said it last week. Eagles Lions, I would be coming onto the podcast saying if it worked out a certain scenario where I'd have a lot on the Eagles. That was going to be an exciting scenario. It didn't pan out. Somebody jumped up and bet the Lions a week before we were able to get against them. So I look at this game and say, I'd like to talk a little bit about the first 2 games and what you guys saw in those games. But to RC's Jalen Hurts point, his rushing yard total is 31.5. So it's clear from the prop market that Jalen Hurts is going to be limited with his knee injury. There was the questions. I mean, he's cleared from his concussion stuff, but there's still maybe potentially lingering stuff from that. A.J. Brown's got his injuries. There's issues with Philly's offense, but I think I would be aligned with RC if how do you pronounce Sam Cosmi? Is it Cosmi pronounced? That is their best offensive lineman, their guard, who went down in that game last week against Detroit. So it's It's their best offensive lineman. And I was reading that they might not, I guess for the rest of the game, they plugged in the backup. For this game, they might shuffle the entire offensive line. You know what happens when the best offensive lineman goes down many times. And I got to tell you, everyone was talking about Saquon Barkley, and Barkley deserves a lot of credit, but Jalen Carter single-handedly won that game for the Eagles last week because Saquon Barkley did his thing and did all of his stuff. And it was Jalen Carter who got the sack on the 3rd and short. It was also Jalen Carter who forced the Kyron Williams fumble right after the safety happened. And that just kind of squashed the momentum and gave the ball back. So if you're going to tell me they're without their best offensive lineman and he's an interior offensive lineman, and you know, with how disruptive and awesome, I was so impressed with Jalen Carter. It was annoying to me because I wanted the Rams, but it just showed what a force he was, what a player he's turned into in his second year. And I think with that being kind of the unsung power of the team against now a clear weakness for Washington, I feel like it's an Eagles win. And I mean, for RC's sake, I hope not a cover. I don't really feel like I want to bet the Eagles or tease the Eagles. I'm not interested in Washington. Again, my heart wants to see the story continue, but I think we got the Eagles at home for the 4th straight game, the Washington on the road for the 4th straight game. So there's a lot of historical things that kind of make this the end of the road. They were, hugely positive, they being Washington in turnovers against Detroit. So it was very, they played well, but it was fortunate from that point. So, I didn't bet any Washington, and at this point, the line is blown up to 6.5 at least on FanDuel. I see it now, so it's 6.5. That's the clear support for the Eagles. Probably the jump was, I'm guessing, the 4.5 that it opened at was Hurts uncertainty. Now being more comfortable with him, the line's going up where maybe you'd expect it. So I do think it's interesting to look at both games because the first, the game that Washington won was one of their patented last drive comebacks, that they almost didn't even have a chance to put together. And then the other game, Eagles won comfortably when it was early enough in Washington's season where you had a rookie quarterback, things were coming together. The defense over the course of this season has gotten so much better for Washington. There was a time where people talked about them just being a nothing defense. Go ahead, RC.
When you brought up that first game of Washington, Philadelphia, I just want to add on to that a little bit to see if it changes any minds or what it does as a refresher to that game. The game that Washington won, that was where Hurts got hurt and Pickett came in and Washington had a furious comeback and won it. I don't know if that's going to foretell anything or not just because of the Pickett factor. But that first game was a Thursday night game that the Commanders had the lead going into the 4th quarter. It was probably the ugliest Washington game I saw the entire season. They got up 10-6. They got up real early in the game and just sat on that lead for 3 quarters. And they just kept running Brian Robinson up the middle. They kept failing. They'd move the ball a little bit and then they'd punt it. It was a Washington team that was trying to not lose a game, trying to sit on a lead. Then all of a sudden, and Saquon didn't have hardly any yards. The commentators were complaining about where is Saquon, why aren't they getting Saquon the ball? Everything was going Washington's way in a very dull manner. Hurts was struggling against the defense. Saquon wasn't doing anything. Washington was trying to sit on this lead. Then Saquon popped through, got a touchdown. Then an avalanche happened, and all of a sudden in the 4th, it went from 10-6 Washington to 26-10 Philly, and then Washington got a very late touchdown that was meaningless. or kind of meaningless. It was 16 points down. And I think they got a touchdown and a 2-point conversion. So they did get like an onside shot at the end. But it was really Eagles put it away in the fourth quarter. For 3 quarters, Washington was in that game, but they played in a style that they really haven't played since. I don't know if that's something that Dan Quinn learned from that game or if he just happened to be watching Dan Campbell along the way. But I think Washington will go into this game unlike the previous 2 times with Philly, where they think they're these riverboat gamblers that are going to go for, I think you're going to see a lot of fourth down go for it's again. I won't say trick plays like some of the bad Detroit Lion trick plays, but you're going to see a lot of curveballs thrown at the Eagles. I think this is a different Washington team going into this game that makes it interesting. I don't think the Eagles really haven't crushed Washington in their 2 matchups for 3 rounds, for 3 quarters. Washington was winning that game when Hurts was fully there. It was the fourth quarter that Philly came and knocked them out. I wouldn't be surprised if Washington has this radical game plan and really throws the Eagles for a loop. I don't know if that's enough for them to win this game, but at this Washington team at the end of the season, it's nothing like the way that they were playing earlier in the season. And they were playing well, but they were playing pretty traditional. Now they're really wide open and doing a lot of interesting things. They may get caught with their hand in the cookie jar trying to get too cute, but I think this is going to be a different – it's going to be the same Philadelphia team against a very different Washington team. That doesn't mean that Washington's going to win, but I think this is going to be a different Washington team who looks back at their 2 games before. You know, some of these times I think a team, if it's in the same conference and they meet up in the playoffs and they look back, like I think the Steelers would have looked going into that Ravens game and thought, we're going to lose this game. There's no doubt we're going to lose. Like, there's no way we're going to beat the Ravens in this game. It's just I just kind of felt that way because they got throttled by them a couple weeks prior. I think Washington goes into this game, and the Eagles are probably the best team left in the playoffs at full strength. I think Washington's going into this game going, we beat them, albeit against Pickett, not Hurts. And we beat them for 3 quarters the first time we played them, and we just kind of blew it in the fourth quarter. I don't know that they're afraid of this Philly team, and they're playing such a different style. I think it's going to be interesting, and I'm comfortable taking the points. But I don't think they're better than the Eagles overall. But I think there could be a moment here like it was against Detroit. And if Hurts isn't being 100% is a huge thing where I think Washington does have that chance in this game where normally if this was everything being equal and Washington, if this was like a first round game, I would think that Washington would probably get crushed under the Eagles' power. But I think this very moment, I'm not so sure Washington ain't going to find a way to win this game the way that they've been playing.
Before I say my piece on this game, I want to also give a shout out to how good the Commanders played this season. Chris, you picked them in our preseason podcast to win the division. RC, you were the one during the draft jumping up and down saying how good of a job Adam Peters did with all of his picks and everything. So I mean, you two were kind of on them before anybody else was. But I think this very moment might be too big for this team, especially for a rookie quarterback. Now, you guys talked about how, Washington was beating them for 3 quarters in the first game. They won the second game or whatever. But really the way that I'm viewing that in my head, the other way to spin that is in that fourth quarter, the Eagles really pummeled them in game 1, right? And then in game 2, in the first quarter with Hurts in there, they were dominating them. I think they were up 17-0 before Pickett came in. So they clearly figured something out. And I think what that might be is the fact that their offensive line, there's a very big mismatch between their offensive line and the Commanders' D line. The Commanders, we all know, give up a lot of rushing yards. They gave up 100 yards to Tampa on 25 carries in the wild card round. They gave up 200 yards on 23 carries to the Lions in that loss. So that's almost 10 yards per carry. If you consolidate their last two games, they're giving up 6 yards per carry. Now you have Hurts limited. You have that strong offensive line. I don't think the Eagles are going to try to get cute here and do a reverse pass with Jamison Williams or their Devontae Smith throwing the ball, throwing a pick. They're not going to have an end around with Jalen McMillan fumbling the ball. I mean, these are all things that were pivotal moments with Detroit getting cute, Tampa getting cute. I think Eagles are just going to pound Barkley, and I don't know that Washington's going to be able to have an answer for that. So I don't know, and maybe this is more recency bias for myself, just seeing what happens when Philadelphia hosts a championship game. I mean, we saw when they played San Francisco, they only allowed 7 points, but obviously Purdy was out of that one, so I don't know how much we want to account for that. But then, a few years back when they played Minnesota, they only allowed 7 points too. So I just have this recency bias of NFC championship games in Philadelphia and them just smoking the competition. I don't know that they only allow 7 points here, but I'm really comfortable laying 6 and going with Philadelphia. Do you guys think that Barkley here in this moment could potentially go berserk, like have like a 150-yard game? Or do you think that Washington just sells out to stop the run?
Well, I will say that Barkley's rushing yard prop is the highest rushing yard prop that has ever been dealt to a player. Now, props have really had their, rise over the last 4 or 5 years where they're, I guess, widely available since legalization. But the last that I saw, and I could pull it up in a second, but it was 128.5. So I think that the market is expecting a lot of Barkley. I don't know if some of that has to do with Hurts. My thought on Barkley is, he's going to be featured a ton. But then to your question, Andrew, about can they stack the box against him? What I wonder is, last week this is the Eagles against the Rams. Hurts was limited with his knee, so that hurt his mobility. He had that one long run, but he couldn't really run. But then he couldn't really throw. I don't know if that's because of his knee. I thought it was more because of the elements. So I kind of look at this game and say, if it's cold but not a snowstorm, then Hurts probably can still throw the ball. So you still have him as a passing quarterback. He was he'll probably still, if he scrambles, go down before he gets hit, like he was doing. But I think the AJ Brown injury is also interesting because then you take their number one receiver, and he's been limited. He's really
and Dallas Goedert may not play.
Oh, I didn't even see that. Well, so that's what I wonder. I wonder less about Hurts throwing the ball. I expect him to throw more, but then the concern becomes the Philly weapons at receiver, really. So I do expect, Barkley attempts. Yeah, he's going to run. I think they're going to. Why would you not lean on Barkley? And I'm going to look right now to see what the attempts are.
Well, you look at that. If I'm Dan Quinn and I'm playing with house money and people expect him to lose this game, and if he loses it, nobody's going to care. But the way that they've been playing the last several weeks, a switch has gone on or something has happened with Dan Quinn where they are playing to win. If I'm Dan Quinn in this game, looking at the circumstances, given that Hurts is, I would bank on that Hurts is not 100%, that you kind of taken away a little bit of his threat to run, and that he's not the greatest passer in the world, But then if he's got a knee problem, he may not be able to plant and throw as at his best. I sell out to the complete run and I go, I'll put 10 people in the box. I dare you, Jalen Hurts, with your knee. It may be fine and you may murder us, but I dare you to beat us with your potential bum knee and a knee brace. I'm stacking the box and totally selling out against Saquon Barkley. And I think the way Dan Quinn has been coaching lately, like if they get burned by a big pass or what have you, they're going to be like, well, we're just going to have to come back and score. Like we're going to stop Bar. That's the most obvious path for the Eagles to win this game, and we're going to just completely sell out to it. I don't know that that's going to be good enough for them to win. The Rams did a version of that, and Barkley would get stop, and then boom, touchdown. So maybe that will happen to Washington as well. But that whole Hurts knee thing, and AJ Brown being not 100%, and Dallas Goedert potentially not playing, this is a time to, if Dan Quinn wants to get radical, it would be to completely sell out to the run and dare them to throw one-on-one against their corners.
Maybe that makes for interesting prop bets if you think AJ Brown or Devontae Smith could have like a long touchdown on single coverage. Those receivers are capable of beating their man, but it's just a question of whether Hurts can do it or not, or Hurts is healthy or not. Are there, before we move to Buffalo and KC, any prop bets that you guys want to lay out for the audience?
Mine are all related to the Commanders passing game, because I think one of two things is going to happen that both results are going to be Washington passing the ball a lot. Either one, they're not going to get caught like they did the first time and get a minor lead and try to sit on it and play conventional football and try to win the game at the end. I think Dan Quinn's going to try to score 30 plus points in this game no matter what. And it's so hard to run on the Eagles. The one way, their most susceptible area is to pass on them. And they're great against the pass too. But I think the ball in Jaden Daniels' hands, running and throwing, is their path to victory. But if they get down, if Hurts is fine and the Eagles whack them and are running all over them, then obviously the Commanders are going to be throwing the ball all over the place. So one way or the other, the passing game is going to be big for the Commanders. And the two players that stick out to me for props off of that is our good friend, the early season ATM machine, Austin Eckler, in the passing game. And he's playing more and more snaps as as we've hit the playoffs, because obviously he's got, all the experience and is a different type of weapon than Brian Robinson. The first time that they played, when Hurts was healthy, Jaden Daniels was healthy, and then all of a sudden Washington couldn't move the ball when they lost their lead in the fourth quarter. They just were throwing to Eckler all the time because the Eagles have good cover corners. They shut down Terry McLaurin, but Austin Eckler had 8 catches for like 90 yards in that game. So I think we see a repeat of Eckler, and then De'Ami Brown. I think you just ride the hot wave that he's on. They shut down McLaurin the first time that they played. There's going to be a lot of focus on McLaurin. De'Ami Brown, they can use in different ways to get the ball to not just downfield. They can do bubble screens and different things like that with him because it's working. So I think De'Ami Brown gets over his yardage prop, and Zacchaeus could, but he's hurt. He's not even a sure thing to play this week. So I like Eckler. I like De'Ami Brown, possibly Zacchaeus if he's really starts practicing in full. McLaurin I worry about because, man, did they shut him down the first time with Quinion Mitchell, and Mitchell looks like he's playing. Another reason I bet the Commanders early was I thought Mitchell might miss this game and Hurts might be in trouble as well. So both of them both of them practiced in full today. So my bet theory early in the week is blowing up in my face.
Before moving to for Chris's thoughts, RC, good point on McLaurin. We've seen top level corners be able to pull him out of games. One thing I wanted to ask you, what about Ertz? Do you think that this could be like a revenge spot for him, or are the Eagles pretty good against tight ends?
They held him down. Like I'm going everything off the first game because the second game got so off pattern with Pickett. But Ertz was quiet in the first game, and then when they got way down in the fourth quarter, then there was a lot of throws to Ertz. So I think we even got the over on that, but it was like late. It had to happen late. It was a big flurry at the end late. So I don't know that revenge is a factor. I think it's going to be winning the game, and the Eagles are susceptible in the passing game to the tight end. So there's something to that. I'm not against it.
Yeah, I guess when I think about the props, I would think about Ertz and De'Ami Brown, or Ertz and Eckler, and the De'Ami Brown. I like it. I understand it. I was listening to somebody give a handicap on De'Ami Brown, and they were just talking about how much the numbers have jumped from game to game. So he has been really become a big part of this offense, but he's at 43, or he's 42 and a half. He was 34 last game, 29 the game before that. So when he really took over for Zacchaeus and popped when we're hoping for Zacchaeus against Tampa Bay, I feel like he's getting priced to it. He still might get there, but my concern, the reason I like Eckler so much better is I just have a huge concern about the Washington offensive line. So you're talking about a team going on the road in the playoffs, compromise that offensive line. I know it's not a tackle, but I just think about some of the teams when they lose their number one offensive lineman and how disruptive that can be to the offense. All of a sudden, things just don't click the way they were before. And yeah, Daniels can move, but I think that's going to result more in versus a scramble middle of the line. I think it's going to result in getting the ball out quickly. And sometimes we're designed for Austin Eckler. So now if he's involved more in the screen game, that's the guy that I really have circled. And Ertz is reasonable too. Anyone that's a short pass, I like better than anyone who's a long pass for Washington. I know that there's going to be the volume there, but I just feel like in playoff games, I hope it's a good game, but if it doesn't go Washington's way, I could also see it just falling apart and not having backdoor stuff happen. When I was listening to the RJ Bell's Dream preview, they were talking about how when these teams play the fourth straight game on the road and it's a playoff game, it's really not anything against the spread, like a 6-6. It was no big deal. But where they saw the biggest discrepancy was in the fourth quarter, the scoring in the fourth quarter. And it was almost a touchdown a game that the teams are getting outscored by. So that's my challenge again my heart wants Washington. If they're going to have trouble at the end of the game, I feel like the Eagles offense can be patient and run Barkley if their defense is holding down Washington. And I think there's a chance for that. So that's what all that stuff just leaves me too uncertain. If that offensive line injury didn't happen, I think I'd be on the underdog. And I see 6s mostly right now in this game. FanDuel 6.5, but mostly 6. Similar to last week's game with the Rams. If this goes to 7, I would take Washington. But I don't think it's getting there. I think it'll be enough resistance to keep it at 6.5. But you can never tell day of the game. Yeah, I think Washington's a popular team, so they probably will be taking some underdog money. But if we do get to 7, I would take it, just like I had no plans of betting the Rams last week against Philly because we already had all the futures. But once it hit 7, I took it.
Just a couple of things off of what Chris was talking about with the offensive line issues. Definitely gives into Eckler in the screen game. The other player that they use in the screen game is De'Ami Brown. His rise to power started with being involved in 1 or 2 screen passes, and then he was like Marvin Mims Jr. with screen passes. They've expanded his game the last couple weeks, kind of like a poor man's Marvin Mims is what De'Ami Brown is doing. But if you're going to play the bad offensive line leads to, if Washington's smart, they'll get the quick passing game and screens and everything and get away from the middle of the line of scrimmage. That's the De'Ami Brown moment. Ertz may have to stay in to block more, may be an issue, but Zaccheaus, if he plays, if he's practicing in full, Zaccheaus's breakout game was against Philadelphia, I think. It may have been the week before he did well against Atlanta, or maybe it was the week after he did well against Atlanta. But he really tore up the Eagles their second matchup, because the Eagles, for all their great defense, the slot wide receivers have been doing well. But if Zaccheaus isn't 100%, we might see De'Ami Brown getting into the slot as well. So just a couple factors to back up the O-line issue.
And Austin Eckler 24.5. That's a good number. You like that? You feel good about that?
I mean, he's most of the season, he's like getting his prop numbers in the first quarter.
Yeah.
As a limited use thing, I think he'll be heavily used here.
The two things that I liked from what you guys just said when you guys were going back and forth, RC, Ertz maybe having to stay back and block more because of the offensive line, not being fully healthy. And then Chris, fact that Washington's been on the road 4 straight weeks. I knew it was 3. I forgot the last game of the season they were on the road as well. So I mean, that, like you said, there was no real betting trend there, but maybe that fourth quarter under is something to look at for that reason, for Washington's total at least. So that's interesting. And Zaccheaus, both the Falcons and Eagles, those are revenge games for him. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting if he can do that again against the Eagles.
You're talking about Ertz staying in the block. He also may not play as many snaps because their other tight end, John Bates, is an excellent blocker, and maybe he's going to be in the game a lot more. Instead of 2 tight end sets, he might be in on single tight end sets as a quasi extra tackle.
6th lineman. Yeah. Interesting.
And that may have Ertz out of the game. Plus, it brings into play that, I was just looking to see if there's Bates props out there, it's probably, a half a catch or 3 yards receiving. So if Bates is in the game a lot more, it's just take 1 catch for him to hit his props. But on DraftKings, he's not even gotten anything listed yet.
Final thoughts.
It may not have one.
Sorry, RC. Final thoughts before we move on. Okay.
Well, I'm looking at ESPN's page. The defensive RC will love this. The defensive coordinator for the Commanders said it's 11-man football to everyone stop Saquon Barkley. That's the plan. I wish he didn't tell everyone what the plan was, but that's the plan.
But if they can get him to, if that gets Philly in changing up and going, okay, we're going to come out throwing, we'll show them. That may be exactly what Washington wants them to do.
All right,
Okay.
I'm betting Eckler, and I'm looking for Bates. That's my bets on that game.
Plus 6,500 first touchdown, John Bates. I don't think that'll happen, but I'm hoping they'll put up a prop for a half a catch. They'll probably do that Sunday morning and put him up for a half a catch and 3.5 yards, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an interesting one for a lesser known player. Might get good odds on it. Okay, second game on the slate. We have Buffalo going into Kansas City. We get a premier heavyweight quarterback matchup, Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes. Bills have won 3 of the past 4 against KC. Josh Allen has never won a road playoff game, and Buffalo hasn't won a road playoff game since 1993. 32 years. Now,
You're saying they're due.
potentially. So the series before this game, Allen and Mahomes have played each other 8 times. Josh Allen's 4-1 in the regular season, 0-3 in the playoffs. If Josh Allen loses this game, and after this last one, I'll provide the betting trends and flip it over to you guys. If Josh Allen loses this game, he'll be the first quarterback in NFL history to lose to another quarterback 4 times in the playoffs. So with that, Kansas City is favored by 1.5. The over-under's 48.5. Chris, do you think that Josh Allen's gonna make history in the wrong way, or do you think that the Bills are finally due?
But is he breaking Peyton Manning's record against Tom Brady? Is that who it is that holds the
No,
record?
actually, if you look at Brady versus Tom Brady in the playoffs, Manning won 3 times, and Brady won only twice. So that's a lot. I mean, if you look at the regular season, I think it's a little more lopsided. The other quarterbacks, I did some digging on this today. A lot of research during my day job, but I think it was Favre versus I think it was Favre versus Aikman, and there was some other ones that Elway and Marino, I believe. There was a one quarterback was winning more than the other, but I'll look that up while Chris gives who he wants to go with.
Yeah, for me, it's not about Josh Allen's legacy or any of the things that we might use to build up to this game. You know, there's storylines. If Baltimore won last week, it would be Lamar finally won a second playoff game in a year, and now can he slay Patrick Mahomes? I get it. We're building up the game, and it is true that the Buffalo's lost all 3 of the playoff games. But if you think about the playoff games, I guess I heard someone today, Teddy Covers, were saying Buffalo, they lost the 13-second game, which is clearly not Josh Allen's fault. I mean, he threw that touchdown to put them up and seemingly won the game. The other game was in overtime. The other game was by a field goal. So yes, they were close, but then he came to what I consider to be the wrong conclusion. He was like, those games were so close, you can't really draw anything from it. I say you absolutely can draw something from it. The fact that the games were close is the whole point. That's the whole point of it, is that this is probably going to be another close game, and it's the Bills who need to get over the hump. So I guess when I look at this game from the beginning of the week, I don't understand why it's not Chiefs 2.5. That's kind of just my expectation of where the game has gone. And then when I heard people talking about the game, they said, well, the public sees Mahomes as an underdog or a small favorite, and they just want to bet him. But that doesn't seem to be true either, because the bet splits show the money is coming in on Buffalo, and yet the line went from a pick and is leaking out to Buffalo 1.5, Buffalo 2. So my question would be, why, if more money is on Buffalo, is the line moving in such a way that invites more money on Buffalo? That is a real kind of red flag for me and a concern to say, wait a minute, with the Bills. So this is another one where my heart is with the Bills, and I know Bills fans. It would be fun to see the Bills in the Super Bowl. But as I said, texted to you guys, when I put together these profiles of teams and what they look like in terms of predicting playoff performance, part of my reason for wanting Philly-Detroit was Detroit's profile looked a lot like the old Ravens teams that lost in the first round. And so, of course, I should have really been paying more attention to Washington, but that was a tough call. I liked Washington with the points, but not I should have done it on alt spread, because that could have been, at least it's consistent with an upset. And so in this case, I had the Chiefs in teams that look like the Chiefs in a championship game, 9-1 against the spread. And the Bills, I haven't tallied it all up, but teams that look like the Bills, not good. So I just I bet on that, So I'm taking the Chiefs. I took the Chiefs -1.5. I'm with the Chiefs, and I do it confidently because I trust my numbers. It doesn't mean that it's never going to lose. It just means it's going to win a lot more than it loses. So I had no problem putting money down on the Chiefs, and then you have all of the kind of anecdotal, pieces of evidence. That's my main driver. But Mahomes hasn't lost yet as an underdog or a favorite of under 3. So you got the best quarterback in the league, and people complain about the penalties. The penalties for the Chiefs. For once, I wouldn't mind being on the side of the referee Patrick Mahomes jersey swap. So I figured I'll jump in on that. And Buffalo last week against Baltimore, they only had one penalty in that game. They kind of played a perfect game to beat Baltimore. So at a high level, I say someone had to win Baltimore. Not to take credit away from Buffalo, but one of those two teams was going to win. And then once they won, people were going to then backfill the story about why they're a team of destiny. And I think if the Bills beat the Ravens by 20, maybe we're having a different conversation. But it was just a game someone had to win, and good for the Bills for winning. Their home road splits are dramatic. So I feel like the year the Bills are going to topple the Chiefs are when they actually get home field and maybe have a defense I'm more impressed with. So all those things just make me say, doesn't feel like the time. If it is and I'm wrong, again, you can have my money, and I'll also take some joy in seeing Buffalo in the Super Bowl. That'd be fun.
Well said. And last year was the year where they had the home field, but they obviously couldn't get it done. Before I flip it to RC, aside from Mahomes beating Allen 3 times in the playoffs, the other mismatches at the QB position, Favre beat Young 3 times, Kelly beat Marino 3 times, Aikman beat Favre. So Favre is on the wrong side and the right side of that. And Brady beat Philip Rivers 3 times. So not a crazy stat, just something fun to look into. RC, what are you thinking about in this game?
I bet very lightly on Buffalo for no good reason other than the same reason that I picked them against the Ravens. I had a gut feeling, and I've got a gut feeling in this game for Buffalo, which is probably going to be wrong, but I will immediately hedge my little minor bet. If Christian Benford is out for the Bills, I am out on any thought of this great Bills gut feeling momentum play. He's the key to. I mean, they do not have a good defense. The Chiefs don't really either, but Buffalo's is really not that good. Benford is their best player. If you take him out of the mix, like they can afford, like Benford and Rapp are both questionable. I can live without Rapp playing, but if Benford doesn't play, they are really in trouble on defense. But the only other little twist to this game for me is I don't recall in this whole Chiefs run of the last couple years, and we all always joke about the Chiefs getting the calls and all that. This to me feels like the first time that everybody is talking about it. It's on all of the talk shows, and it's on. I mean, it is getting beat to death to the point it's like the old when Phil Jackson used to need to dial that up with the Chicago Bulls run. Whenever they'd get in a little bit of trouble, he'd pull the card of the refs not calling things for Jordan or what. He'd play mind games with the refs, and then teams would do that against them as well. But I always remember Phil Jackson being a master at that. It's always been a joke among the fans, but I feel like this is the first year where it's like every talk show is talking about debating does Kansas City get favorable calls? So I'm guessing that is going to be raised. It's going to be heard in the referees room for sure. But then I don't know if you guys saw this, they also assigned the ref that calls the most penalties against the Chiefs, and that Mahomes I believe, has a losing record when I don't even know what the referee's name is. I have to look it up. When he's the ref, they get the least amount of calls their way, and he has a losing record when he's the referee of their games. He doesn't have his normal crew because they have, whatever, an all-star crew for the playoff games. But that was the little twist in this that I think that I'm going to be interested to see how this is going to go, whether they're going to keep flags in their pocket because of all the noise, or they're going to throw them, in favor of Buffalo because of all the noise, or if it's going to be same old, same old. But
yeah, the
referee is favorable.
It's Blakeman, right? Clete Blakeman's the guy.
Clete Blakeman, 6-5 record Mahomes has. It's his worst record against any officiating crew. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we're definitely in an age where everyone wants to say something outrageous, or they want to say the thing that the fans. I mean, in the old days, you wouldn't have professional broadcasters talking like fans at the bar necessarily, and they're not always right. I mean, that play where the two Texans crashed into each other, where Mahomes was sort of walking around, dancing around, and ducked down. I mean, if he's ducking down, I mean, I know you're like, I never played, in the NFL, so you're just like, I get it's fast, but why are you even going in with your head and not with your hands? Once he goes down, just touch him. I don't know. I just felt like they obviously were going in with their heads to hit someone, and they happened to hit each other. And I also heard people talking about the ref that makes that call was behind him, so when they crashed and his neck snapped back, it looked like he hit him. My point is, I don't think the refs are going into the game calling for the Chiefs. I certainly have been watching games and thinking, oh, that was a very fortunate timing of that penalty, but I don't think they're doing it on purpose.
In a split second, will they, like, I'm only going to call this if I know that I know, because there's such a fervor.
No.
And if these games are going to be close, is it going to be a no call or a call?
No. Listen,
flips it?
You remember the Rams Saints debacle where even the Saints guy was like, no, I whacked him. I hit him. I whacked him good, and he didn't get called for a penalty. And that was like the biggest embarrassment of a thing. They didn't change anything for that. I think that the rule is, or the charge for the refs is, when it comes to the quarterbacks, if it's close, you call it. So I guess I'll just say I don't always agree. Like, even the people online crying about the Chiefs taking the safety. It's like, oh, it's fixed. So the line it's fixed for because it could get near the point spread. And what no one or very few people seem to realize is that
I already bet it lower than that, so it didn't matter.
You were fine, right? It's but bookmakers don't want the game to land on the number. On the number they set. That's the worst possible thing that could happen. The national championship game, Ohio State, Notre Dame, that was opened up at 9.5. It went all the way down to 7.5. Then it came back up, and that thing was sitting on 8 before they kicked that last field goal. I mean, pretty much everyone wins if that's where the game lands. The Kansas City game, you had some people with 9.5 with Houston. Plenty of people who got the Chiefs below that number. So that safety it wasn't the fix was in, so the bookies would win all the money. It's actually the people that won all the money on that safety, but it doesn't matter. Anything happens, everyone just wants to point and think about how they're the victim, and people want to be the victim of bad, calls because nobody can beat Patrick Mahomes. And so I don't know. I can't imagine they're going into this game trying to right wrongs from last week's call, which they actually explained why the Mahomes was a penalty and why the Goff one wasn't. I mean, listen, Goff got hit in the face bar or whatever, and his head got rocked back. But, like we talked about, there's a bunch of Sam Darnold getting his head twisted and he doesn't get it. Like the good quarterbacks get the penalties. I don't expect Josh Allen to get the penalties because he's so big that it's not, people are bouncing off him. He's not usually getting hit in the helmet, Josh Allen. So I don't think I'm not worried. I'm going in the game thinking, man, back in the Chiefs, the refs might try to right a wrong. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're gonna try to call it. I think you're still going to see Mahomes get protected if people are hitting him, because that's just the way it goes.
RC, in our group chat, you mentioned that Kansas City's run D has been particularly bad over the past 4 or 5 weeks. Could this be a spot where James Cook is featured in the Buffalo offense? Do you see him having a big game here?
I'm betting on it, and maybe it too exuberantly. He did not have a good game against Kansas City earlier in the season, so I think that's holding the line down some. But the Bills have turned into a running back, run game based offense. I don't think they're going to change from that, at least not to start. And with the Chiefs the Chiefs were, to begin the season, the Chiefs were one of the best 1, 2, 3 run defenses in the league. In the last 7 or so games, they've really fallen out. Their overall season numbers are still really good, so everybody assumes this is this great run defense, but it really hasn't been a great run defense in the last 6-7 weeks. Chris Jones has missed some of those games as a factor, but Chris Jones was there for some of those games as a factor. Teams have found something that they're able to run on the Chiefs now, where that used to not even be close to the case earlier in the season. And Buffalo wants to run. They starve their wide receivers and tight ends to death. I think they will try to run Kansas City out, just like I think Washington's going to try to throw the Eagles out of the game, whether it works or it doesn't. I think the Bills are going to try to run their way through the Chiefs. And all it takes for Cook is to get, one good chunk run in there to get, I think his prop is 57, or it was when I bet it. So I think he's going to get a number of carries. He can hit that 57 mark. I laddered it up just because I think he's going to get a ton of touches. I don't think this is a game where they're going to get as cute as they usually do, where when they're really feeling it, they'll put Ty Johnson in and then they'll put Ray Davis in. They may lean a little bit more on James Cook. Obviously, James Cook is the lead. He's going to get a majority of the touches, but I think he may get a little bit more. And if Buffalo can get up on Kansas City, and that's a big if, then I think they will try to run this game out on Kansas City. I don't think Buffalo's coming into this game thinking, wow, like Washington, we're probably not going to win this game unless we do something really creative. We need to just let Josh Allen loose and throw the ball all over the place. I don't think Sean McDermott wants to do that. He's been running his way through opponents and throwing to the running backs as well in the passing game. So I'm playing the Cook props and laddering them up lightly, hoping that he has a 15-plus touch game and pops one of them for a good amount of yardage and maybe I could see him getting a 100-yard game here if he gets the touches. So they have been more spreading it around with Ray Davis and with Ty Johnson, but this could be a spot where they go with the known guy.
Chris, who do you like on the in this game prop wise?
I don't have any I'm looking at James Cook and his attempts are 13.5. So that's right around where I would probably be better off with the yardage. I'm looking at FanDuel RC and the receiving or the rushing props for him. We're down to 55. You said it was 57.5, so it's a little better number right now with the rushing.
I put heavy on like the 57 number and the 60 plus on DraftKings, and then just very light on 70 plus, 80 plus, 90 plus, all the way up to 100 plus.
Okay. Yeah, my the prop that I'm most interested in, and it kind of caught up where we were when we were talking about the Chiefs last week. We bet Hunt over because Pacheco was the one with the higher yardage, and that's flipped now. Kareem Hunt is 35.5, Pacheco's 32.5. So they did, and both of their carries are 8.5. So it's confirmed, that they're going to be, at least the prop market is recognizing that they're going to split. But with I was listening to Dr. Chow's podcast, and he was asking, is the problem Pacheco coming back from his injury, which I kind of tend to think he's not as good now as he'll be opening day next year. But he also said the Chiefs' offensive line is not great, and so that it could be a Pacheco problem, but it's not much better when Kareem Hunt. Remember Kareem Hunt when he came in and was like a savior for fantasy somewhat, at least for me, but for other people too. He was getting like 3 yards a carry. He was just getting a lot of volume. So the offensive line is not good for the Chiefs. And I think that, remember we were talking about last week, you want to take advantage of the middle of the Bills defense. I don't know if this offensive line can. I guess maybe if they get the tight ends involved, I'm sure they can scheme up stuff in the running game. But it kind of, Pacheco under was where my mind went. But once I see the odds adjusted there, I just don't really feel like we're getting the value I want. Last week I loved the over on Hunt, which worked, but also the under on Pacheco should have been really a play too, because he's in there for a little bit and then he's out of the game most of the time, Pacheco.
Yeah, he's definitely lost the, I guess you'd say, lost the job. Essentially, they're going to start him, and they're going to see if they can get him going, but he hasn't been able to get going. And then they quickly turn to Hunt, and you're right, he's just been the better running back.
But I don't know that I want to go under 32.5. The number's getting low now.
That there is a best bet. There is a best bet of the weekend in this game.
What is that, RC?
It's the Chiefs.
But I don't want to player prop. But I want to Chris to finish his thoughts, but I want to make sure, don't let me forget, there is a best bet of the weekend prop sitting here.
Well, that's what I want, because otherwise this I said my stuff on, let me see if I missed anything on the this is the fourth time that a team won back-to-back Super Bowls and then made it back to the conference championship. So those teams are 0-3. Then no one's been able to do it. But Andrew, all of them happened before you were born. So it was the 76 Steelers in 1990, San Francisco, and I think that was against the Giants that beat them.
Yeah.
And then in 94, Dallas. So, and I assume if Dallas lost in 94, it was to San Francisco, but I didn't check.
I was alive for that one.
Okay, good. You're a baby. So I mean, that's a long time ago. None of those teams had Patrick Mahomes. I don't think that's going to be the reason. If Buffalo wins, that's not the reason. If Buffalo wins, that means it wasn't because the Chiefs, couldn't for anything other than they went in there with a good game plan and it was their time, which is a lot of people seem to think that maybe it is. I do know that at least Veasan was saying Kansas City's given the most yards to tight ends this season, but I just hate Buffalo's tight ends. They never produce anything. So I feel like that was a little bit of a dead end, because I've spent the last 3 years of my life waiting for Dalton Kincaid to do anything, and he just won't. And no matter how much I will him to, it never happens. So I think aside from McDermott being 7-6 in the playoffs, which is and with Josh Allen is pretty bad. So I'm ready for the prop bet at this point. I told you I went in, put a decent size bet on the Chiefs, because again, I'm just going with that 9-1 and hoping it goes to 10-1.
The prop bet of the weekend from this game is a certain RC specialty type of thing that I usually pull.
Hold on, let me try to find my kicker.
Can I guess
props
it,
here.
RC?
Go ahead. You can guess it.
Does it involve Curtis Samuel?
No.
Okay.
Does
I
it
had to hold
involve?
myself back from having to bet him.
Does it involve Tyler Bass?
No.
Okay, I give up.
Xavier Worthy, over 4.5 yards rushing.
Hmm.
He
Okay.
has his last 4 regular season games. He would have beat that prop. His last 4 and I'm not including the week 18. He played 1 snap in week 18. But the games before that, games that they needed to win to keep that number 1 seed, he's gotten his most carries in games 3-3-2 for 30, 10, and 10 for yards. He would have hit that number his last 4 regular season games. He would have hit that number 6 of his last 7 regular season games. In the playoff game against Houston, he got 1 carry for -8 yards. So that may be potentially, plus the week 18 game that he only played 1 snap in. I know that the sports books take a lot of the season averages and latest averages. So the fact that he has a game played with no rushing yards is affecting his recent averages. And then the -8 in the playoff game on a run is a bit of an outlier to what he is typically doing, because Kansas City hasn't been able to run the ball as well with their running backs. Xavier Worthy's been getting more run game work lately, so it just takes 1 carry for him to wipe out that number.
I like that, RC.
Unless he gets that carry and wipes out the number, and then
Unless
gets
he gets the carry and
gets a -8.
and then
No.
And then I'm punching my computer screen as I'm watching the game.
Well, I do love it. This is kind of the type of bet I could definitely get excited about already. I could feel like this is finally something that's getting me going.
I said.
Yeah.
And I will say this. Here's what I'll say about the -8 yard carry. It's kind of, in a way, good for us this week, because you would think Houston, in their preparation, was waiting for a Xavier Worthy play, and when it happened, they chased him down, and so I think it has the Chiefs now go back to the drawing board, Nagy and Reed, and say, okay, what are we doing that might telegraph it? What can we do different to add an element of surprise to Worthy rushing the ball? I think I feel really good. I'm seeing 3.5. You said 4.5. I see on FanDuel it's 3.5.
What are the odds?
I clicked off it. It was minus. I think it was -110.
It's -105 on DraftKings. It started out -120.
I'm sorry, my bad. It's -114. Okay. All the props seem to be like DraftKings. FanDuel kind of does that. Instead of -110, everything's -114. So it's a little bit of a you're getting gypped a bit.
But it started at 120, -120 on DraftKings. It's down to -105 right as we're talking.
The over.
The over. So I don't know if it's enough. If the 114 versus 105 is enough to not. I'll take every yard I can get when it's these guys, because they're going to typically get just the 1 carry to get it. So I don't mind sacrificing a little bit to get the 3.5.
Well, Caesars has 4.5, and the over is -110. The under is -120. So they probably are trying to price it at like 4 yards, but they would never put it on a flat number. They want to have the half there. But I was actually hoping that, my hope came true. What's Worthy's receiving yards. I'm going to check that real quick because they do have 49.5. Okay, so here's when it's interesting on Caesars. They actually do have him listed under rushing and receiving yards, and it's 54.5. So you like the over on one carry better than having him capturing his receiving as well.
No, I bet him straight up receiving, not heavy, because I keep thinking, and I've been wrong. I keep thinking they're going to get Hollywood Brown and DeAndre Hopkins more involved and not put so much on a rookie. But last week, the Hopkins and Brown and everybody besides Worthy didn't even have a catch in the game.
Yeah.
And then Worthy had a bunch. So no, I guess I didn't bet. I bet Kelsey over 63 yards.
Okay, that's up higher than that now. Yeah, I guess my thought, obviously, when you have the rushing and receiving, if you do get what you just described, whether it's 10 or 30 yards rushing, you're really on your way. Or if you don't get the rush, which I can't even imagine that could possibly happen. But if you didn't get the rush, you could still do well in the obviously you're just giving yourself two chances, and especially when you just take the receiving plus the rushing, and that's pretty much the number. Well, now you're giving yourself two chances to go over one of the totals and shorten up the other one. I love that option. So I'll probably do both of those. I just wanted to get your thoughts on what you think of him in the passing game. Last game it was him, but a lot of times it rotates and
it's been him fairly consistently, and it's
I know he's
shockingly, but it's shockingly not been Hopkins and Brown. So I keep thinking they're going to come up and bite me on this in the playoffs. We had a nice run with Xavier Worthy receiving yards to end the season, but I thought that would halt in the playoffs. But he was the only wide receiver who caught a pass last week.
Well, in this game, Xavier Worthy, at least on Caesars, his receptions are 4.5, and it's over is -150. So they're expecting him to get the 5 catches. He's being priced like it.
Yeah, his last, again, if they take however much they factor season-long averages in, he was 2 and 3 catches a game to start the season. Then here lately, the last 6 games, 5, 5, 6, 7, 8, 5. So.
Yeah, I heard that they try to. I'm sure they might weight the most recent stuff, but I think when they set the prop lines, they're thinking more median rather than average. So you're just looking at the, 12 data points and hitting the one in the middle as a starting
5.5,
and then adjusting from there. But that's the jumping off point. I understand is the median. Well, the 3.5 I love, and it's just a fun, like that thing that happens once, maybe twice, is wonderful. So I'm looking forward to seeing him on a jet sweep, get 8 yards, and somehow an offensive lineman being downfield too fast.
Oh yeah, that will happen.
That's more fun than people throwing flags on Mahomes.
All right, closing thoughts on this game, gentlemen. Anything else, or did we hit everything we wanted to?
I'm not betting my life on anything on either of these two games.
Oh, okay. Now I just bet my life on the thing you gave us.
What I tell you to bet your life on was it Darius Davis? So you don't have any life left to bet. So I know you didn't. Well, I guess it was a lot easier to bet your life after you spent all your life on Darius Davis.
I went double or nothing.
You got no life left to really bet. So, yeah, you can go all in.
All right. Let's shift into the last topic of the evening. We're getting away from the playoffs, but RC and Chris wanted to talk about Travis Hunter. So the Titans' new general manager, Mike Bergnazzi, I don't know if I said his name properly, but he came out and said that the Titans are open to taking, or the Titans are not going to pass up on generational talent with the first overall pick. So prior to this, all the betting markets were sort of geared towards the Titans taking either Sanders or Ward. And after the Tennessee GM came out and said this, we saw Travis Hunter's draft odds shift dramatically. And with that, RC, do you want to share your thoughts on how you feel about Travis Hunter and what if you actually believe the Titans will go forward and take him?
Well, I bet him at either 1,200 or 1,400 to 1 after I did my scouting report on him, because I cannot believe that that a team sitting at the top of the draft in such a draft as this, with two shaky quarterbacks that are the top guys, that are really not graded highly. It reminds me of the Pickett draft year for quarterbacks, that teams would forego their need for a quarterback so hard, so desperately, that they would just take the best thing available. That's in Ward and Sanders. You're probably talking two guys who aren't even first round NFL grades. That the Titans would, or any team at number one, would needing a quarterback go, well, we have to take one of those two guys, when it would be so easy for them to, not easy, but try to buy somebody in free agency or trade for. There's so much quarterback talent coming into the league that a lot of the backups now on teams are decent prospects as well. But you can buy veteran quarterbacks to come in and play right away. Sam Darnold may be out there on the free market. I don't know what Carolina's going to do with Andy Dalton. Jameis Winston is a free agent. They can get a plausible quarterback to come in and compete with Levis or Rudolph, because if they don't see Sanders or Ward as a real answer, and thus freeing up, I'm not saying that all of a sudden Tennessee's like, man, these two quarterbacks, we just don't like them, I guess we'll just take the next best player. I have thought all along, this last week, since it's really heated up, that Tennessee is going to find a way to draft Hunter first. And if that means they have to trade for Jake Browning from the Bengals because Callahan loves them from their time in Cincinnati, or whether they do that plus sign Sam Darnold if Sam Darnold hits the market, that they will do something to address quarterback to allow them to then take the best not quarterback. But I don't think it's them going, well, the quarterbacks are gone, all right, who's the best? Are we going to take a defensive lineman? Are we going to take Travis Hunter? Is so obviously the best player in this draft, a generational talent. Anybody who doesn't think he's a generational talent is insane. There has never been a player exist in the NFL for the last generation, 70 years, that could be, if Travis Hunter came in and said, I'm only playing wide receiver, I'm not playing cornerback, he would go in the top 15 in the draft as a wide receiver. If he said the opposite of that, he said, I'm only going to play corner, I don't want to play wide receiver, he'd go in the top 15 of the draft. There has never, ever been a player like that in our generation, and a 70 years being a generation.
The closest is probably his head coach, right? Deion Sanders.
Not even. I mean, the closest, if you really want to get into who the closest was, you have to go back to Sammy Baugh and Chuck Bednarik. You have to go back to when there was no face masks. You're a generational talent if the closest thing to you that could be mentioned wasn't wearing a face mask. So
Ocho Cinco was a wide receiver and kicked an extra point.
Chris wins.
Even with Deion Sanders, as talented as he was, and he actually had a season where he had like 36 catches as a wide receiver. He wasn't a very good wide receiver. They were trying to get him the ball because he was such and they should have gotten him they should have found a way to get him in on offense, but not so bright back in that era. But even you could say, well, a little bit of two-way because he was such a weapon in the return game. But he was not a draftable wide receiver. He had not the greatest hands when they tried to put him out at wide receivers. You're talking about Travis Hunter is arguably the best wide receiver in this draft, and he's also the best cornerback in this draft. That's totally insane. That has
crazy.
Never existed before. So if I'm Tennessee, if I was the general manager of Tennessee, I would say we're taking Travis Hunter number one. We can't not take the Otame of the NFL. We can't pass him up for these crappy day two quarterbacks. So we're taking Hunter. Now what are we going to do for quarterback? Whatever that means. Would they sign somebody in free agency, trade for a quarterback, get Russell, whatever it is that they have to do. I think their draft plan, their off-season plan starts with, well, we're drafting Travis Hunter. Now what are we going to do at quarterback? Whether that's draft somebody in the second, third, or fourth round, or I think more likely they sign a free agent.
And just for the audience, if you want the full scouting report, go to ffmetrics.com. You could read all of RC's analysis on Travis Hunter. But one thing we're going to do this offseason too, RC, we're going to dive into your best calls in 2024, your worst calls of 2024. We'll get into that. But one of the ones that you did really hit a home run with, we got to go back to the 2024 draft where you were sort of giving out your blue chip players. You had Bowers up there. You had McConkey up there. You had Neighbors up there. You had BTJ. You had all of these right, and you didn't group Marvin Harrison, and you got flamed for it into that category. You didn't throw Caleb Williams in there. You got flamed for it also in that category. So, is Travis Hunter in that realm? Like, does he have that same potential that you saw in like Bowers in 2024? Is he like the only or one of the only blue chip prospects in this draft?
Let me say it this way. Quarterback is so absolutely critical that when you get a shot at a Joe Burrow, you take it. But aside from whoever you think the greatest quarterbacks of a draft are, take quarterbacks just off the list because it's such a unique animal. In the NFL, in my 15 plus years in this business and thinking back, trying to look at a past generation, there has never been a prospect greater than Travis Hunter. There can't be, because nobody can play both sides of the ball. And I know Ross Jacobs, who will be listening to this and rolling over in his grave, thinks that the NFL is going to play him only at one position, so he's not that valuable, which if that is true, and I talk about that in my scouting report, that's always possible because the NFL has its head up as rear end on many things. But I think I think there's a simple path to how to play him on both sides of the ball. And if you've got a plan to play him on both sides of the ball, even if it's for the first 4 or 5 years, and then you as he gets older, you scale him back, but you can put a plan together for him to play both sides of the ball. You don't have to play him every snap. He doesn't have to be an Iron Man where he never comes off the field. That's insane. It's insane that somebody could be that good. It's not like, oh, he's a decent corner and he's kind of an okay wide receiver, so you could use him on both ends. No, we're talking about a guy who's the best wide receiver in this draft, and the best corner in this draft, most likely. Maybe there's going to be somebody who's a slightly better corner or debatably better, but the fact that you can say that he's the best at both positions all in one player and he's available to you, and he's going to be stuck at that rookie contract. Like if he goes in and if he ends up being a great wide receiver and a great corner, if he becomes the greatest dual threat player the league has ever seen, what kind of contract do you think he's going to be asking for in year 5, or probably year 4? He's going to want it before that. It's going to be insane. So even if you just do him 2 ways for 4 years, that's still going to be the greatest 4 years of a player that you could get. So aside from quarterback, I can't tell you a prospect that's better than him.
And I don't know anything about the new GM for the Titans. I've been following the draft stuff that closely. I just listen to Ross and RC what they have to say about the process. But I guess I was wondering, did they get rid of Carthon because they wanted to do something that's against the norm? Because that's where Ross has a good point when he says teams don't do this. And it's right. I mean, it's like you don't get fired for buying IBM back in the day. Now you would get fired for buying IBM. But back in the day, you wouldn't. So you are a new GM. Quarterback is very important. You know, if you pick a great player and you don't address the offensive line and you have Rudolph and Levis, I guess you're going to get a chance to get your quarterback next year. But I don't know if that really, I don't know. It doesn't seem like people want to waste that 1 year that they're in that role. It was almost like if you pick a quarterback and fail, it's better than picking Travis Hunter and having the pick succeed, because you can blame at least I tried to fix the quarterback, which is so critically important. So that's what I'm wondering. Did they make that switch at GM? Because I believe that, the Vikings, who have 3 picks in this draft, which is ridiculous, I think they said last year, I'm giving them maybe more credit than they deserve, I don't like next year's quarterbacks. We got to get up and get this guy. And also, O'Connell's in his 3rd year with the team, and he doesn't have his quarterback in the future. If you hitch your wagon to that quarterback, you can coach for 15 or 20 years. And so he had Cousins for a couple of years, and I think he really just said we need to start this process of getting our guy that we coach through their career. And so that happened. So I think there's definitely a desire on GM's parts to make that happen. Could this new guy wait a year to do it? I mean, you don't know what pick you're going to have next year. And I get that you don't like these quarterbacks, but that's the gravitational pull away from taking the best player. But what's the benefit of saying we would take a generational player over a quarterback if you're not getting people ready for that, or at least putting the feeler out there to see what kind of reaction you get?
If there was a Caleb Williams, if there was a Jaden Daniel, if there was a CJ Stroud, if there was Joe Burrow, and the alternative to take Travis Hunter, then you're in a real debate of what you do. But I think this particular draft is so unique to allowing Hunter to be number 1, because those other quarterbacks are so not even close to generational. And I think if there's Brian Callahan, to whatever degree he's going to have any sway over this, is a one-way ticket to getting fired by mid-season if he takes a bad or a mediocre rookie quarterback prospect and goes out and is 2-6 to start, and that mediocre quarterback is very mediocre and struggling. Callahan's done.
RC, can you contextualize that for the audience? Because obviously the rookie quarterbacks this year, maybe minus Caleb Williams, they all really impressed. I don't think that's an overstatement. Where would Sanders and Ward be picked if they were in the 2024 draft class?
I think both of them would have been in the second round. They would have definitely been after
Knicks.
Nix, McCarthy, Penix, Daniels, Williams. So what's that, 5? So at minimum, the 6th quarterback taken.
May was the 6th, so it's 7th or 8th.
Sorry. So throw May in there, and May's better than them. So now you're at 7.
Yeah.
I don't know that. I don't know. I mean, this is a pretty weak quarterback class from what I've seen so far. But I don't even know if Ward or Sanders, if either one of them would be the first quarterback taken in this draft. That's how shaky they are.
Okay. I don't want to spoil all of your scouting here. I was going to ask you who could be that outside guy, but let's just leave that for the offseason. Otherwise, we'll tailspin this conversation.
Yeah, I don't know who that person is.
Oh, okay.
So speaking, I've got somebody in mind that I could see a path to them jumping up, but it's more so that Sanders is not an elite quarterback prospect. We can debate whether he's going to be good, whether he can develop and all that. He's nowhere near elite. And when the reports come out and say that most teams have him graded second round and further, I believe it, because he's a second round and further type of quarterback talent. That'll usually get you into the first round when there's not a lot of other quarterback options. But I still maintain, and I think that's why you see Sanders starting to fall right now, I cannot believe an NFL team is going to take that circus, because Deion Sanders is coming to the show with you. Shador with his 6 cars and jewelry collection is coming. You would be insane to take that player unless they were off the charts great. Then you have to do it. But the fact that most teams don't even have him rated that highly, and then he's one of the worst quarterback personalities that any NFL coach would ever want to deal with, and his dad going to be over your shoulder chirping in your ear for 4 years, it's not happening. So now I think it's down to Ward potentially going number 1 by default, and he's got the complete opposite story and background and personality that Sanders does, but he's also not a first round. He would also be the 7th quarterback, or however many it was that we counted from last year's draft. He's just not that good, and neither is Sanders. Sanders is just a lot of being in the public eye, with the Colorado games being so exciting and Deion being such a magnet, and but really when I watch back through, Sanders, is a lot of him throwing it to Hunter, and Hunter being a magician once he gets the ball, or being a magician to get the ball. So I think even if you were like taking Sanders seriously at number 1 as a talent, if you're watching the tape, you would instantly go, how are we not taking Travis Hunter? Because you'd be seeing him on every other play that Shador Sanders has. If Travis Hunter didn't go to Colorado, we wouldn't even be talking about Shador Sanders in the first round of the draft. We probably wouldn't even be talking about him until day 3 of the draft. If his last name wasn't Sanders and his dad wasn't Deion, we wouldn't be talking about. He'd be the mediocre quarterback of Florida Atlantic.
But RC, I think it goes both ways. I mean, if Hunter didn't team up with Deion, he was originally committed to, I think, Florida State. Maybe that coaching staff doesn't let him play receiver, and he doesn't develop those skills in college.
Yeah, all possible things, but they did, and we all found out he's incredible.
Yep.
So that's already established.
Yep.
We've seen Travis Hunter. We've seen Shador Sanders. I don't know how anybody could watch the tape of Colorado from Sanders's point of view and not go, Travis Hunter is the best player on that team. Travis Hunter breathed life into Sanders before you even get into the circus that Shador Sanders is going to bring to your NFL team.
And just to kind of clarify, this is after the GM of it was the two quarterbacks. Ward took the lead over Sanders in the odds. He was like minus 130. Sanders somewhere in the range of plus 130, plus 150. And Hunter was plus anywhere from, I think, 11-1 to 15-1 recently as Sunday, right? And then whenever the comments were made by the Tennessee GM, the odds completely crashed on Travis Hunter to the point, and Shador went up. So it's Ward still the favorite, slight minus. Hunter still plus odds, plus 145-ish, and then now Shador is plus 300 or so. So that in that range,
Yeah.
and that was kind of the discussion we were having is when the odds crashed on him. Ross was saying it's just because of a comment. Nobody has any inside information. And all I was trying to say is, no, it's not inside information, but it is reflecting the probability that of who's going to go first. Travis Hunter's probability increased based on those comments because everyone assumes quarterback. And unfortunately for us, we were, when we did the Kenny Pickett thing, that stuff was after the Super Bowl, but I think everything's just speeding up, with legalization, but that if they're going to put draft odds out there, it's going to be focused on it was a sleepy market for a little bit, but it's moving faster and faster, it seems. So we did get a little double digits on Travis Hunter that we at least have, but not a chance to Kenny Pickett #1 overall which was probably 30 bets. We had enough time to keep popping it.
And at that time, you look at it and you go, okay, I thought Kenny Pickett was a good prospect. Still think he is and can be, but I thought he was good in a sea of not a lot of great quarterback talent. And then you assumed to bet him #1 that, okay, these NFL teams, they always default to taking a quarterback. Pickett is obviously the best of this bunch. Yeah, he's not great, but somebody's going to do it because that's what they always do. And then they didn't. But we're 3 years removed from that now, where in that 3 years, quarterbacks are coming out of every orifice. Guys that are 40 years old are suddenly great. Guys that were busts in their original place or two are now great. The rookies that just came in, I mean, we named 6 of them. All 6 of them are going to be taking up spots. You're going to have free agents like Russell Wilson, and I think Justin Fields may be a free agent. Winston is. Sam Darnold, if he's not a free agent, he's going to be available in trade most likely. Andy Dalton may be out there. So there's all these quarterbacks out there that there's not such a desperation of, you got to take a shot at quarterback because they don't come around that often. Now they're coming at it everywhere. And Sanders and Ward not being that good, I think just opens the door to not a quarterback. And then if it's down to that, it has to be Hunter. There's no way it couldn't be Hunter to me.
More to come on that. So for all the latest on the draft news, RC scouting reports, Ross's scouting reports, ffmetrics.com. Check out Chris's podcast, Bet the Close, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can go download it there. We'll be back next week to actually 2 weeks from now to discuss the Super Bowl bets, but hope everybody has a profitable championship weekend. Thank you for all of you guys tuning in, and best of luck.
One last thing
Go
before
ahead,
you hit it,
RC.
just a tease. I do think there's a quarterback that's going to be drafted ahead of Sanders and Ward by the time this is all done. To be
Okay.
revealed.
And so we need to keep our eyes out on, because this, as we get, it's probably an after Super Bowl situation, but you do see the specific positions. First quarterback drafted.
Yeah, they haven't hit yet. So,
No, I think it'll be a little bit, but that's where, because I mean, we talked about Hunter. It's an interesting topic to talk about, I think, but it's not actionable right now. But the first quarterback is, that's a market we're gonna look to go after.
All right. Well, stay
All right.
tuned, guys. That'll be a good one. Have a good luck this weekend betting, and definitely check us out during the off season for NFL draft betting.